Okay, so as we continue on now past the Mishnah and embark in the Gemara starts off by asking, V'chol kach loma. Why is it that someone who says that there is no tchias hamesim from the Torah, why does that mean that he loses his portion in olam haba? If someone does not believe in the concept of tchias hamesim, of resurrection. So Tana, we learned in a brisa, who kafar b'tchias hamesim, because he denied the resurrection of the dead. Lefikach, therefore, lo yiyeh lo chelek b'tchias hamesim. Since he denied resurrection of the dead, he will not have a portion. He will not participate in the resurrection of the dead. Shekol midosav shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu mida kineged mida. Because all of God's measurements are always measure for measure. Whenever Hashem gives someone a punishment, it's always a reciprocal punishment that fits the crime exactly. Now, first of all, I just want to point out something interesting, because the Gemara was listing those people who lose their portion in Olam Haba, who lose their portion in the world to come. And the first one listed again was someone who denies resurrection. We said, why do you lose your portion of the world to come if you deny resurrection? Because that's mida kineged mida, that's measure for measure. You deny resurrection, you don't get the world to come. Now, you may recall earlier, before we began actually studying the Gemara, I mentioned that there were a number of different opinions as to the connection between resurrection and Olam Haba and Gan Eden. So the Ran wants to bring a proof from this line in the Gemara that when we speak about Tchias HaMesim, when we speak about resurrection, it's clearly resurrection to Olam Haba, the world to come. Because if not, then penalizing someone who doesn't believe in resurrection with losing Olam Haba would not be a manifestation of Mida Keneged Mida, of measure for measure punishment. Why is it that Hashem always punishes Mida Keneged Mida, measure for measure? So I think that the simplest and most basic way of explaining it is because for all those of you who have ever attempted to be parents or to be teachers, so one very important rule of education is that punishments that are punitive are rarely effective. A truly effective punishment is always one that reflects the crime, that is actually not so much punitive, but a direct consequence of the offensive action. But a punishment which doesn't reflect the crime and doesn't somehow communicate to the offender the pain that their crime committed and the consequences and the fallout of the crime, is just simply not an effective way of giving a punishment. That would be, I would say, the most simple understanding of why Hashem punishes Mida Keneged Mida, measure for measure. On perhaps a little bit of a deeper level, we can understand that the Mekubalim, the Kabbalists, teach us that our ultimate destiny is predetermined by God. Our final spiritual state, when all of existence ceases to exist and our souls reunite with God, whatever spiritual level of connection that we are going to have is predetermined. Really, our free will merely allows us to choose the path of how we get to our ultimate destiny. We can choose the path that God laid out for us in the Torah, and that's, so to speak, the smooth path how to get to our ultimate spiritual destiny. Or we can choose to reject the Torah, and then each time we stray off the path, God has to nudge us back to where we need to be to get to our destiny. So that's why it's measure for measure, because there's a path we're supposed to walk on. And straying from that path just means we've got to be knocked right back onto the path, reflective of how much we've strayed from the path. The Gemara goes on to say, the Amar Rav Shmuel bar Nachmani Amar Rabbi Yonasan, Minayin. What is the basis for this concept? Shekol midosov shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu mida keneged mida, that all of the measures of God are measure for measure. Shenemar, because the pasuk says, Vayomer Elisha, the prophet Elisha said, Shimu dvar Hashem, listen to the word of God. Ke'es machor, at the same time tomorrow, Sa'a soles b'shekel, a measure of fine flour will cost 1 shekel. V'sasayim sa'orim b'shekel, and 2 measures of barley will also cost a shekel. Bishar Shomron, in the gates of Shomron. So in the city of Shomron in Samaria, there was a siege going on. And the result of the siege was that within the city there was a famine. And due to the famine, the cost of food staples had skyrocketed. And along came Elisha the prophet and said, tomorrow prices are going to collapse. So Vayan Hasholish Asher Lamelech Nishan al Yodo. So the agent upon whom the king relied responded as Ish Elokim, to the man of God, meaning to the prophet Elisha. Vayomer, and he said, Hine Hashem osa arubos bar shemayim, even if God would make windows in the heaven and literally make grain fall from the heavens, Hayiyah hadavar hazeh, could such a thing occur? Vayomer, and Elisha responded to him, Hincha roa be'einecha, you are going to see it with your own eyes, umisham lo sochal, and from there you will not eat. Exactly why he was skeptical, there are different opinions among the commentators. Some want to suggest that he was simply skeptical about God performing such a miracle. And others say his skepticism was not about God's ability, but he felt that the people of his time were so wicked that there was no way that God would perform such a miracle for them. And it goes on to say a whole story about how there was some strange noises in the middle of the night, and the enemy army that was camped around Shomron ran for their lives, leaving behind all of the food and all the supplies. And the next day, the people were able to come out and plunder the camp. And sure enough, the price of food dropped tremendously. Vayhi lo chen. And it happened to the assistant exactly as the Navi Elisha had prophesied. Vayirmasu oso ha'am bishar vayamos. And the people trampled upon him in the gate, and he died. That he was standing over there, still skeptical about what the prophet had said. And as the multitudes of the people of Shomron went charging out of the city, and he was standing right by the gate, they trampled him and killed him. So why? So the Gemara is explaining that because he denied that God would provide this food, he was not allowed to have that measure of food. And that was his punishment, midah keneged midah, measure for measure. So the Gemara asks, Vidilma, perhaps it has nothing to do with God punishing midah keneged midah. Perhaps kilas Elisha garmale. Maybe it was a result of the power of the curse of the prophet Elisha. The Amar Rav Yehuda taught, Amar Rav in the name of Rav, kilas chacham, the curse of a wise person, afilu al chinam, even if the reason why he gave the curse is not particularly well-founded, he ba'a, it will come true. So maybe it wasn't because this was a punishment from God, maybe it was because of the power of the curse of the prophet. So the Gemara says, Imkain, if so, Lichtov Kra, the pasuk should have written, Vayimrasuhu Vayamos, that the people trampled him and he died. My Bishar, why does it mention that they killed him by the gate? Al Iske Sha'ar, because he was killed because of the matter by the gate, meaning because of the fact that he had denied the words of the prophet as he stood by the gate on the day before. On this concept that the curse of a wise person will come, the Maharal has a very interesting explanation, which is brought down by Rabbi Yitzchak Meir Morgenstern. He compares it to the concept of Eidim Zomimim. Eidim Zomimim, without getting into all the nitty-gritty details, are witnesses who were perjured. And the halacha is that if the person against whom they testified had not yet been punished before we discovered their perjury, then the punishment which was supposed to go on the victim of their perjury instead goes upon them. But the perjury has to be discovered at a very interesting juncture in the case. It must be that after the court had rendered their decision about the punishment that should be given to the person, but prior to the punishment being carried out, we discover that they have perjured themselves. So now the punishment that they wanted to give to the person is placed upon them. But if he already received his punishment, then the perjured witnesses are no longer punished with the reciprocal punishment. Why not? So Maral explains, because when Bezdin, when a court speaks out din, speaks out a judgment, that judgment, that speech of judgment has tremendous power. And it has to find a place to take effect. And therefore, if it did not yet take effect on the defendant, then it has to manifest itself by taking effect on the witnesses. In the same way, when a wise person speaks out words of cursing another person, those words have to find a place to take effect. They can't end up just going completely to waste. And therefore, they find a place on the person who he cursed, even if he didn't really have such a good reason to curse. Back in the Gemara again, the Gemara we read had concluded that he was punished al iske shar, on the matter of the gate. And we explained as we read the Gemara that because standing by the gate, he had denied that such a miracle would occur, so now he was punished measure for measure. The Marsha offers a slightly different explanation. The Marsha says that we find in many places that the word shar is a term used for a price. And therefore the issue was that since he had ridiculed the price, that's why he was now punished. And actually, some want to suggest that what happened was the minute he discovered how much food there was outside of the city, he immediately went outside and tried to hoard as much of the food as he possibly could in order to drive up the prices of the food. And therefore he was punished al iske shar on the matter of the price because he tried to hoard the food and keep all of it for himself. Okay, we will stop over here for now. Thank you so much for listening. Have a very good evening.